everybody, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. Today we are diving into part 2 of the Ryan Poston and Shaina Huber's case. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I highly recommend starting there because 1 always comes before 2, and if you want to understand how we got here, you need to see where this all began. In part 1, we met 29-year-old Ryan Poston, a young, successful attorney in the prime of his life. He had his own law practice, a supportive family, a close group of friends, and a bright future ahead of him. But as we quickly learned, Ryan's personal life told a very different story. For more than a year, he'd been trying to break free from a toxic and obsessive relationship with a woman named Shaina Hubers. Ryan and Shaina had broken up more times than anyone could count, but every time she came back. She had a key to his place, she kept her things there, and she refused to accept that it was over. Shaina's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She sent hundreds of text messages, showed up uninvited, impersonated clients through fake texts, and told friends she wanted to make Ryan ugly so he'd never get another girl. She even joked about shooting him at the gun range, of all places. In October 2012, Ryan confided in friends about how badly he wanted Shaina out of his life. He even scheduled a date with someone new, Miss Ohio, Audrey Bolte. That date was set for the night of October 12th, but Ryan never showed up. Instead, at 8:53 p.m., Shaina called 911 and claimed she had shot Ryan in self-defense. First responders arrived to find Ryan dead on the floor of his condo, shot 6 times with his own handgun. And we talked about that 911 call Shaina made that night, how odd it was, specifically when she told the dispatcher that after she had already shot Ryan, after he was down, she shot him a few more times because he was still moving and twitching, and she knew he was going to die anyways. As if she was trying to liken what she had done to the man she loved, allegedly. She was trying to make it seem like that was a mercy kill. And last time I made the comparison to Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito, that comparison is still accurate. It still stands. Shaina, on the other hand, had no injuries, no visible signs of abuse. But that didn't stop her from telling police Ryan was violent, that he'd thrown her around the room, and that she'd been forced to kill him to protect herself. When we left off in part 1, police had just arrived to Ryan's condo, and Shaina would be taken to the station for questioning. We have a lot to cover today, a lot. So let's first have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Midas Merge, and then we'll dive in. All right, so before we get back into today's case, I want to share something I've genuinely been obsessed with lately, actually for months, especially when I need a break from researching very dark topics that we talk about on this channel for hours on end, and it is a game called Midas Merge. And listen, if you love magical worlds, addictive puzzles, and seriously adorable creatures, you're going to love this. In the game, you're helping King Midas and Queen Leia bring light back to the Gardens of Gold, which are trapped in shadow by Nyx, the goddess of night. It's got mystery, lore, and this magical sun energy that you collect by merging creatures, plants, and treasures. And the more you merge, the more secrets of this cursed garden you uncover. But my favorite part is the creatures. You know, I love real life creatures. I love fictional creatures. I love all creatures. And these creatures in Midas Merge are so cute. Like, look at this one. It's called a capybird. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Part capybara, part bird. You hatch it as this fluffy little baby, and by merging items, it grows into a majestic level 3 version that I'm weirdly emotionally attached to. There's also a turtle with a bonsai tree on its back and a sneaky little mox fox, which I'll tell you more about in 1 second. It's completely free to download, there's no ads, and you can play it offline, which makes it perfect for decompressing without distractions or when you're traveling or you don't have Wi-Fi. It's one of those games that's relaxing and satisfying, but also has depth and mystery to it. It's challenging enough to keep you interested and hooked, and just beautiful enough to keep you, I don't know, just really happy and dopamine filled. And here's something exclusive just for you guys. If you're among the first 100 people to download Midas Merge using my link in the description box or scanning the QR code on the screen right now, you're going to get a personalized level 1 Mox Fox as a gift. Now, this little guy isn't just adorable. It actually helps speed up your progress in the game. And if you're watching this during spooky season or one of my haunted garden stories, then you might get a rare black cat instead. A creepy, cute creature with glowing eyes and serious Halloween energy. And with Halloween coming up, guys, it's right up our alley, right up our alley. So grab it while you can. Seriously, I love this game. The design is gorgeous. The story is enchanting. The merging is so satisfying. Whether you're playing for 5 minutes or an hour, it's a cozy escape from the real world. So if you need a little sunshine in your day or just want to hatch a ridiculously cute magical creature, check out Midas Merge. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to start your garden and grab your exclusive gift. I'll see you and your Cappy Bird in the gardens of gold. Thank you so much to Midas Merge for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Shaina was taken to the police station for questioning, and that interrogation was recorded and lasted just over 3 hours. Right from the start, her behavior was strange, which is the understatement of the century. Lieutenant Fornash, who led the interview, later said, quote, "It was crazy. You just wouldn't believe it," end quote. And the first major red flag came up when Lieutenant Fornash went to step out of the room briefly, and Shaina started making noises like she was crying, these loud, forced sobs. But as soon as he was gone, she stopped. The police chief, Bergenhauer, noticed this right away, and he later told the media, quote, right off the bat, like a light switch, "I'm thinking that she's, pretending." She wasn't crying. No tears came out of her eyes, end quote. Soon after, Lieutenant Fornash re-entered the room, and Shaina was read her Miranda rights.
Your name is Shaina?
Shaina Huber.
The right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law.
After giving her Miranda, she said that she wanted an attorney, and I pretty much quit asking her questions. She started talking.
So pretty early on, Shaina told Lieutenant Fornash she wanted a lawyer, and he responded, "Okay, so I can't ask you any questions at all." And this wasn't a question he was posing to Shaina, like, "Okay, I can't ask you any questions at all." He was telling her, "You've asked for a lawyer, and until your lawyer's here, I cannot ask you any questions." But he didn't tell her she couldn't talk to him or everybody at the police station, because even though Shaina had invoked her right to counsel, she couldn't stay quiet. She kept talking and talking and talking, despite no one asking her a single question.
I don't have any serious injury that I could have had.
Right.
And I shot him in self-defense because he's done stuff before where I've hit my head on a headboard and could have died.
She didn't like to be in there by herself. She wanted someone there the whole time to hear her side of the story, to hear her talk.
It's really messed up that we had to get into a physical fight and that this had to happen, And if I could go back and go over again, I would rather have my head beat into the coffee table.
I know that sometimes in these interrogation clips, Shaina's going to be hard to understand, but what she said in that clip right at the end, she said if she could have done it all over again, she would have rather had her head beat into the coffee table. Now, obviously, at this point, the police are going to listen to what Shaina had to say. That was the point in having her there. They didn't know anything about Ryan Poston. They didn't know anything about Shaina's relationship with Ryan or if there had been a past history of abuse, documented or otherwise. All they knew was that a young man was dead on the floor of his condo, and the woman who had pulled the trigger was allegedly that man's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, and she was behaving very oddly. Shaina kept on talking, and it actually got to the point where officers and detectives began rotating out of the room just to avoid burnout. They nicknamed it the Shaina Huber's Show because she monologued so relentlessly, once again, often without being asked a single question. So one officer said he didn't want to interrupt her performance. She seemed desperate to be heard, desperate to sell her version of the story. She hated being left alone, and she would keep calling officers back in, trying to keep someone with her at all times. I personally feel that this was kind of an anxious response for Shaina. And it's going to make sense later on when we talk about her mental health and her diagnoses. But if you know anything about attachment theory, it's very clear that Shaina Hubers was anxiously attached. Even though Ryan had broken up with Shaina several times, sometimes for months at a time, she refused to accept it, and she continued contacting him, showing up at his home and work, and inserting herself into his daily life long after he tried to end things with her. Shaina would also flood Ryan with text messages and calls, and when Ryan asked for space, she didn't reduce contact like a normal person would. It actually seems as if she would intensify her attempts, increase her attempts, trying to force reassurance through sheer persistence, because anxiously attached people can do this when they sense emotional distance. Shaina was showing her anxious attachment in the police interrogation room because when someone with this kind of attachment style feels powerless, talking can become a control strategy. If they're doing the talking, they feel that they're steering the interaction. Silence can also feel like abandonment to someone with anxious attachment. So if other people leave the room, it can trigger anxiety. What are they thinking about me? What are they saying about me? Calling the police officers back was not really about Shaina giving them information. It was for the goal of soothing her discomfort with the unknown and also making sure that they really didn't have a lot of time to talk amongst themselves about what her story was and what her claims were. She was probably very nervous that when they weren't with her in the room, they were outside being like, this girl's guilty of sin, right? Like nothing she's saying adds up. So if she could keep them in front of her, a raptured audience, then, they wouldn't have as much time to talk amongst themselves, put two and two together. And someone like this is also going to be hyper aware of shifts in mood and body language. And in a high stakes environment like a police interrogation, that kind of hypervigilance can turn into active narrative management, giving extra details, repeated explanations, and filling in the gaps to keep the other person from defining the situation without their input. When she was left alone with her own thoughts, Shaina's behavior got even more bizarre. She paced around the room, snapped her fingers, and sang to herself.
How sweet the sound that I sang. Oh, rest. I'll be right back. Thank you. I did. Yes, I did. I can't believe I did that.
Who else do we know that did stuff like this during her police interrogation?
And I won't go, and I can't breathe until you're resting here with me. And I won't go, and I can't hide. I won't leave.
That was Jodi Arias, and Jodi didn't just sing. She laughed randomly, talked to herself, did yoga poses, all sorts of out-of-context behavior.
Goodness.
It's the Jodi Arias you haven't seen.
Should at least done your makeup, Jodi, gosh.
But what comes next is the most bizarre behavior yet. From the woman who now says she shot Alexander in the head, stabbed him 27 times, and slit his throat ear to ear in self-defense. A glimpse into the mind of Jodi Arias, who is now dead serious when she says, A jury should believe her story and spare her life.
Now, I think I know, at least to some extent, what's happening here with both Jody and Shaina. Some people might say that they seem mentally unstable. Some people might say they were acting this way because they knew the cameras were watching and they wanted to appear mentally unstable, or maybe they just wanted some weird form of attention. I see it a little differently, however, because I can relate. I see what Shaina and Jody were doing as stimming, which is short for self-stimulatory behavior and refers to repetitive physical movements, sounds, and other actions people use to regulate their nervous system and emotional state. Stimming is often discussed in the context of autism and ADHD, but these kinds of behaviors can appear in anyone who's under a large amount of pressure or stress or anxiety, any kind of emotional overload. So these are movements like pacing, swaying, bouncing a leg, which is my thing, twirling, spinning, rocking back and forth, and vocalizations like humming, singing, muttering, repeating phrases. Even things like dancing and stretching are very effective stimming methods. For me, the dancing, moving the body in any way, yes, singing, humming, things like that, very good stimming activities for me. In fact, my father always used to do stuff like that when I was younger, and I thought that when he was like singing and walking around the house or around the restaurant singing, that it was because he was happy. And I was like, oh, he's singing, he's happy. Now I realize he was probably not happy. He was probably stressed or just trying to focus himself and ground himself. And that's why he was doing that. Anxiety creates a buildup of nervous energy, and moving your body, whether it's pacing, dancing, tapping your leg, that's going to help burn off this excess energy and keep focused by anchoring yourself to this physical action to prevent spiraling thoughts. And like I said, I do this kind of stuff all the time. However, I don't know if I would do it if I was aware I was being recorded in a police station after killing my boyfriend. I might sit at the table, shake my leg, I might tap my fingers or pick at my nails or something like that, but I don't know if I would lack self-awareness enough to put on a full-blown concert. Obviously, a police interrogation is going to bring a pretty extreme level of stress to a person, any person. And I do think that these things they were doing, this was a way for both Shaina and Jody to try and calm themselves. But I'm also not going to dismiss the very real possibility that these actions were also performative, knowing they were on camera. At one point, Shaina even did this little pirouette thing. She spun around and then said out loud to herself, I did it. Yep, I did it.
Over the years, I've seen people who have been in shock. I've never had anybody tell me that someone pirouettes when they're in shock, that someone sings when they're in shock, that somebody snaps their fingers and says, I did it, when they're in shock.
I did it. Yeah, I did it.
Yeah, to be honest, the pirouette was a little much. It was a very kind of joyful expression, but like I mentioned earlier, when officers were in the room, Shaina wouldn't stop talking. She focused heavily on her relationship with Ryan, which she described as abusive. She claimed that he had a dangerous temper and she was afraid of him at times. Shaina alleged that he kept loaded guns in his condo. She told detectives, quote, he has picked up a gun and pointed it at my face as a joke. End quote. She painted him as aggressive and controlling, someone who demeaned her in public and mocked her. She said Ryan often made her feel small, and he was whacked out on drugs. Shaina alleged that Ryan was regularly using a mix of different medications, Adderall, dextrostat, which is a stimulant, Xanax, and other substances. She claimed he kept an Altoid tin filled with Xanax and that he had refilled a 90-pill prescription for dextrostat the day he died. But according to Shaina, only 77 pills were left in the pill bottle, implying that Ryan had taken 13 that day alone. And here's my question. What are you talking about? How would you know that? If he refilled the prescription the day he died and you bamboozled him at his apartment, which is what you did, you weren't invited, you were broken up, you showed up to his apartment again, uninvited, unexpected, and forced your way in, when would you have had the time to check his prescription bottles, right? If he filled it that day, when would you have the time to do that? Before you killed him? After you killed him? Either way, that's crazy. That's some crazy shit, right? Why are you going through his prescription pill bottles? Now, it would be different if he'd refilled it a few weeks earlier and maybe she was just being nosy and she was looking through one day. But that day, the very same day he refilled his prescription, you're counting the pills in his bottle. You showed up to his apartment. He was getting ready to go out on his date. There was an argument. Then you killed him. When did you count the pills in his prescription bottle? But anyways, Shaina said that Ryan's mood was completely dependent on whether he was using uppers, downers, or some combination of both. Shaina also told detectives that on the evening of October 12th, she went over to Ryan's condo because she loved him and she wanted to work things out. According to her, she had no idea if he had plans or not that night. Remember that statement. She claimed that Ryan then flew into a rage, leading her to have to kill him in self-defense. She said, quote, "I don't want to go to prison. I don't think I deserve to. I didn't go over there intending to shoot Ryan. I went over there with the best intentions. I love you. Let's work this relationship out." And he was screaming and hitting me, resorting to violence, end quote. Shaina told the detectives that Ryan started throwing her around like a rag doll, into furniture, onto the floor, even into the TV. Remember that statement. But the problem with that story was that detectives didn't observe any serious injuries on Shaina. Aside from a faint bruise on her shin and some light marks on her wrists, Shaina didn't appear to have been attacked. She didn't look like someone who had just been in a violent struggle, a struggle so violent that the only way to get out of it was to shoot your boyfriend or ex-boyfriend 6 times. And even more striking, she didn't act like someone who had just been in a violent struggle and committed murder. Throughout her hours at the station, Shaina didn't seem all that distressed. Aside from singing and dancing, she complimented the officer's teeth, saying, "You have really pretty teeth. Did you have orthodontia?" She asked also, quote, "If I have to go to jail, can you shower there or do you just get really dirty?" And she also said, quote, "If you go to jail, are you allowed to keep your phone?" And this is what annoys me about Shaina, because remember, all the people who knew her, well, like her mother and her friend, they were like, she's brilliant. She's genius level. Shaina will tell everybody that she's a genius. And I mean, she was smart. She did well in school. She graduated from college in 3 years instead of 4. Obviously, she's smart. She knows some things about things, all right? She knows things about some things. But she's sitting here acting like, "Officer, do you get to shower in jail or do you just get really dirty? And like, can I keep my cell phone? Like, I don't think I would care if I was dirty as long as I could keep my cell phone and keep talking to people and, posting selfies." It's like this whole, I'm just a dumb little girl. What do I know? How could I be a murderer when I'm also just a dumb little girl? And she's not dumb. I mean, she, instead of asking the police officers, "Hey, you have nice teeth. Have you ever had braces?" She's like, "You have really beautiful teeth. Like, have you ever had orthodontia?" It's just using big words unnecessarily. But then she pretends to have complete ignorance about, whether you can shower in jail or have your phone. Yes, you can shower. And no, you can't have your phone, Shaina. But Shaina kept talking, and the more she talked, the harder it became to take her seriously. Detectives continued asking her to talk about the actual shooting. She said the argument eventually moved to the dining area, and Ryan was on one side of the dining room table, which is like a circular or oval-shaped dining room table. She was on the other side. She said his loaded handgun was sitting on the table where he usually placed it when he got home. She said, quote, "This look came out of his eyes. He was like capable of anything," end quote. Detectives asked her multiple times to explain what happened next, and Shaina gave them more than one version. So let's start with one of the first ones. We know that during her 911 call, Shaina said that Ryan pushed her down from the door all the way to the couch. He then threw her across the room. She elaborated on this during her police interview.
And in the middle of him doing something with his arm or saying something crazy, shot him. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? You know? And he was laying with his face on the table, like twitching. And so I knew he was going to die a very slow and painful death. I knew he was already dead. You know, it's within the next 20 seconds. So in the next 2 minutes, I knew he was going to be dead. And he was in a lot of pain. He was twitching, he was moaning, but he was ultimately dead. And so I shot him enough times to kill him so that he wouldn't suffer at that point, which was a few more times. And I shot him, I think I shot him twice. Thought he was completely dead, and he was laying there still, twitching and making noises. And I shot him in the head. I probably should have left it there, but I knew he was going to die. Mm-hmm. Or have a very deformed face. And you were concerned. And I knew, oh no, he would have died. He was already dying. He was dying. But I just walked around the table and shot him where I knew he would die immediately. And fast. His obsession with guns killed him. You know, I would have never, I'm so Democrat, I would have never touched a gun in my life until I dated him.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. So first of all, remember this version of events, not just right now, but for later. Shaina said they were, you know, I guess he reached for the gun, she reached for the gun, she got it. He was in the middle of doing something with his arm, something crazy. She never specifies. And then she shot him. And then he, I guess, fell forward onto the table. Like his head fell forward onto the table. And then she said he started twitching and moving, and she knew he was still alive, but she knew he was already dead. Not like technically already dead, but he was going to die, right? Within the next 20 seconds, within the next 2 minutes, because she's a doctor, she would be able to determine that. And so she walked around the table and shot him again. And then she says something, which, once again, I'm going to tie back into later. She said his obsession with guns is ultimately what killed him, you know? No, Shaina, you are ultimately what killed him. You killed him with the gun, right? It's not his obsession with guns that killed him. It's your obsession with him and your access to his gun that killed him. And she says something like, oh, I'm so Democrat. I would never even have touched a gun until I, dated him. That's bullshit too. If you're against guns, you're against guns. Okay, I know people that are very against guns. They won't go near a gun. They won't go in a house if there's a gun there. They will never pick up a gun and touch it. They wouldn't even know what to do with it, right? So for Shaina, who we know actively went to the shooting range with Ryan, texted her friends about wanting to turn around and shoot him, and now she's saying, I don't like guns, it was only because he was obsessed with guns that he's dead. It's gross. It's disgusting. The whole concept of I knew he was going to die because he was twitching and moaning and he wasn't dead yet, so I had to walk around the table and, put a few more bullets in him out of mercy. Even the police at this point, especially the police at this point, they know that's insane. That's an insane thing to say. You don't do that. You call the ambulance. You call the police. You let the first responders decide whether or not Ryan can be saved. You don't play God. And remember that she said his face was on the table. He had fallen face first onto the table. She walked around the table and shot him again. Standing. She doesn't say she's doing anything else but standing. That story is going to change. That whole version of events is going to change. And here is a later version of Shaina's story, which somehow is even more cold. And she says something in this clip that, I've seen a lot of police interrogations. I've seen a lot of people say a lot of messed up things in police interrogations. Remember the Slender Man case? That was absolutely bananas. What she says in this interrogation clip is the worst thing I think I've ever heard anyone say in a police interview. Maybe besides Chris Watts. I don't know. It's messed up.
He had put his arm across the table, and there's a lamp, and he put his arm across the table and had it in my face and was screaming at me at the top of his lungs after he had thrown me around the room, and was saying emotionally to me, "You're capable. I hate you. I hate everything about you for what you are. I promise you." He was screaming, and he had his hand on the table, and he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. So like he was sitting. He was enough that when he was like this, literally, that's when I knew he was dead, or close to it, and twitching. And I couldn't. I let him. I still, even though it hurts, I still, and that's on me, loves him. That I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. I knew he was going to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants my best friend who's a dentist to do his veneers and wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I'm right here. I gave him his nose job. He wanted a croquet.
I mean, this is absolutely unhinged. Yeah, so let's once again discuss. First of all, she says Ryan was saying all of these mean things to her. But in my opinion, you can tell she's pretending to try and recall exactly what he said, which apparently was, I hate you, I hate everything about you, you're a hillbilly, I hate your family, stuff like that. I think she even said at one point that he told her, I hate your Eastern Kentucky accent. It is clear to me she's making this up as she goes along, right? Because she's like, oh, what did he say? What did he say? I mean, apparently this was so emotionally charged, you don't remember what he said. You couldn't remember. He said, I hate you. I hate everything about you. It's pretty basic, right? She's making it up as she goes along. Now, do I think that Ryan was like, get out of my life. I don't have anything to do with you anymore. Why do you not get this? Probably. But she's making this up, in my opinion. And then she says, she shot him, but she still loved him. So she couldn't just stand there and watch him suffer. No, you don't love him. You don't shoot somebody that you love, right? You don't do that. And then she tells the detective she's talking to, Ryan was so vain. He had talked to me about getting a nose job, and by shooting him in the face, I gave him the nose job you wanted. Now, if that remark isn't just off the wall enough, you can tell that not only does Shaina want to laugh at this when she says it, because she clearly thinks it's clever and hilarious, she even starts to laugh a little bit before, pretending to cry, right? She starts to laugh before that mirth transitioned back into sadness. It's like she could feel the giggle coming out, and she was like, that's a bad look. And then she tried to turn it into this weird choked sob, but it didn't work. Rewind it if you don't believe me. She's starting to laugh, and she's kind of like, I gave him the nose job he wanted. It was very awkward, and clearly you thought that was funny, right? You made a joke about shooting your boyfriend in the face and giving him the nose job that he wanted. You're a psychopath. Even with that pretend sob, that's an absolutely insane thing to say. In my opinion, it shows how angry she was with Ryan. It shows how much contempt and resentment she had for him. And unconsciously, she was just unable to hide that. Detectives asked Shaina more about the gun that she used to kill Ryan and if she had to switch off the safety. She said, quote, it was a handgun that I used. The gun was this big. I picked it up off the table. I did have to release the safety, end quote. This response stood out for two reasons. First, the police believed that releasing the safety indicated intent. It wasn't a panicked reaction. It was a deliberate action. And second, it didn't match the version of events that Shaina gave during the 911 call. If you remember, on the phone with the dispatcher, Shaina said Ryan had reached for the gun and she grabbed it out of his hand. But now she was saying the gun had been on the table and she picked it up herself. Not only that, but I don't know if you noticed, she's basically telling us, not really, she doesn't know she's talking to us, but she is now. She's telling the police that he wasn't physically hurting her at this point. She said he'd thrown her around the living room already. Now they were arguing, standing across the table from each other. Shaina's back is to the door to leave. They're standing across the table from each other and he's yelling at her and waving his arms. Shaina's basically telling us that she shot somebody in the middle of a verbal argument. A verbal argument. He wasn't attacking her. He wasn't coming at her. She just was like, the gun was on the table and his hand was kind of close to it. So he could have tried to get it. He could have gotten it and shot me. But still, Shaina insisted it was self-defense. She said, quote, he would have killed me. It was scary. I was scared. Oh my God, that was frightening. I was scared. I could have died. A part of me wanted to get my keys and get in the car and leave because I knew my word against his and he's dead, you know. How is anyone else to know that it's self-defense, you know? End quote. If you had the option, Shaina, to walk out the door, get in your car and drive away, it's not self-defense. It's not. That's one of the main features that they look at when they are trying to decide whether or not it is self-defense. So, I mean, she wants to keep talking because she wants to soothe herself, but her talking, it's really just digging her in deeper and deeper.
I don't think that what I did was necessarily, like, completely wrong, you know? No, not someone that you see outside. He said, you're just the hillbilly from Kentucky. And I am. If the hillbilly came out of me, I took up to myself. And like, part of me doesn't feel bad about it. That part of me does, you know what I mean? Like, that part of me was like, you hit me, you threw me. You don't treat a woman like that. I was like in high school and she was a convicted felon. She told me that, and then that she went for cocaine. And then that she got along with in jail or prison. Or the women that were there because they had killed her husband and said that. Hell has no fury like a woman's core.
Okay, it keeps getting wilder and wilder. Now, I know, once again, her voice got kind of low halfway through, but Shaina said that Ryan told her she was just a hillbilly. And then Shaina said, well, I guess that hillbilly came out and I took up for myself. She's basically saying like, oh, you want to call me a hillbilly? I'll show you how a hillbilly acts. Does this sound like self-defense? Shaina also said, I'm not your typical murderer. This is very telling because you killed in self-defense allegedly. So what Shaina should have said was, I'm not a murderer, right? She's saying, I'm not your typical murderer. I'm not like other murderers. I'm not like other girls. I'm special. I'm different. She did not say, I'm not a murderer, because somebody killing in self-defense is not committing murder. She's like, I'm not your typical murderer. I don't belong in jail. Oh, yes, you do. Then at the end, she's like, a part of me doesn't feel bad because you just don't treat women like that. So she's basically saying, I don't really feel bad for killing him because how dare he treat me like that? How dare he talk to me like that? How dare he think he can, in my opinion, what I'm hearing, how dare he think he can break up with me and move on with someone else? Then she mentions some woman, and this is kind of confusing, but I figured it out. So she had known this woman when she was in high school. This woman had to go to prison for cocaine. So let's call her Woman A. So Woman A goes to prison for cocaine. And in prison, Woman A meets Woman B, another woman in prison who she got along with. And woman B told woman A something that woman A passed along to Shaina later, I assume when she got out of prison. Shaina says she remembered that woman A said to her, quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," end quote. And then she left. Once again, what I'm hearing here is I killed him because he rejected me. The actual phrase, "hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," means a woman who's been rejected or betrayed in love can be incredibly vengeful and angry. It doesn't mean a woman who's the victim of domestic violence can be vengeful and angry. What I'm hearing from Shaina is, you rejected me, and I am now vengeful and angry. Not, you attacked me, I was scared for my life, and I didn't want to have to kill you, but I saw no other way out. Killing somebody in self-defense is not a vengeful or angry act, okay, at all. It's just absolutely bananas. And I don't know if you picked up on it, but she also laughed a little bit after she said, well, you know, I guess if I'm a hillbilly, I took up for myself. Like, she kind of like laughed again and tried to turn it into another like sob, but it was clearly a laugh, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section.
Never believed it until now. And, you know, I wasn't doing anything that was mean. I was, like, begging him to stay in the relationship and be with me because I knew that we weren't really loving each other. You know, Ryan had told me that he loved me and wanted to be with me. I guess somewhere along the way, that grew to hate. He was screaming how much he hated me. I don't know if anyone will ever want to marry me if they know that I killed a boyfriend himself. Not funny, but stuff he was saying to me was so abusive while he was throwing me around the room. I'll never forget. I think in the midst of that, my love turned to hate. I remember screaming, reaching up to grab the shirt. You have to dare me. You mock my family. You have to dare me. I don't get any serious consequences. And I could really be happy just having a career and maybe not even ever getting married. Because it's very traumatic, you know. Very traumatic. For me to live with it, I have to know that I did that for someone that I told every day I love you.
Once again, just in case what she was saying wasn't clear, I'll recap it for you, because I think Shaina's being honest here. You know, a lot of people who lie and who lie often and compulsively usually use a thread of the truth to build this lie off of, and I think Shaina is telling the truth here. And then she almost realizes she's telling the truth, and then she tries to like pivot. So Shaina said that she knew that she and Ryan had both once really loved each other, and that's why she was begging Ryan to stay with her, even though allegedly he's this horrible abusive monster. But somewhere along the line, her love turned to hate. You kill somebody in self-defense because you're afraid for your life, because you think if you don't do that to them, they are going to kill you. She's talking about her feelings at the time when she picked up a gun and shot Ryan. And she's saying, my love turned to hate. Then Shaina says something wildly out of pocket yet again. And this time she does not try to hide her laughter. She's laughing right out loud. And for honestly, a little bit too long. It was awkward. She said, I don't know if anyone will ever want to marry me if they know I killed my boyfriend. And like I said, she laughed. And she laughed for, I don't know, it felt like 10 minutes, but it was probably like 15 seconds. But I think she saw the look on the police officer's face who was sitting across from her. So she quickly followed this comment and this laughter up with the words, it's not funny. It's not funny. But then she kept smiling. She kept smiling. It's absolutely ludicrous to watch. She's like, it's not funny. It's not funny. He was so abusive. And she was smiling when she said he was so abusive. It's just absolutely insane. Shaina also says that if she doesn't get serious consequences, she feels she could be really happy with just living life and having a career and maybe not ever getting married, because this whole thing has been very traumatic for her. For her, it's been traumatic. It would be really tough for her to live with the knowledge that she had killed somebody who she told that she loved every day. She'd have to live with that forever. It's been very traumatic. She might just, not get married and just have a career in her life. She's insane. She thinks that after what she did and what the evidence is going to show, there's a chance that she doesn't have serious consequences. She thinks there's a chance this doesn't end with her behind bars in some way for some amount of time. She's delusional. And I think I know why. We're going to talk about that later. So after wrapping up their 3-hour interview with Shaina, police didn't believe she acted in self-defense, which I'm sure we're all shocked by, right? Huge plot twist. The whole time these police officers and detectives are like looking at her, hearing the things she's saying, and they're absolutely dumbfounded, right? And in that last clip we heard, Shaina was like, he was telling me all these horrible things about me, my family, and I was like, how dare you? How dare you say that about me? How dare you say that about my family? This is what she's doing when she's picking up a gun and shooting him. Does that sound like self-defense? If you thought you were in danger of being killed by somebody, you would either try to get out or placate them until you could get the weapon. You wouldn't be screaming at them like, how dare you? That sounds like somebody who's angry, somebody who's mad. And that's why she killed him, because he made her angry and mad. Obviously, saying things like she gave him the nose job he wanted, saying things like hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Shaina sounded bitter and petty. She sounded resentful. She didn't sound sad or regretful at all. She tried to, but she didn't pull it off. So Shaina was kept in custody, and the following day she was formally charged with the murder of Ryan Poston. She entered a not guilty plea and stuck to her self-defense story. Her bail was set at $2 million, which she couldn't pay, so back to jail she went. When Ryan's family heard Shaina's version of events, they pushed back hard and loud. They released a public statement that read, quote, Ryan's family is devastated by this loss. Ryan was as bright as he was kind and as principled as he was caring. His passing is an unspeakable hardship to so many people. We ask that all of Ryan's family and friends, as well as our community, keep Ryan and those who loved him in their thoughts and prayers. We want to make it clear that Ryan was trying to end this relationship. He was trying to move on with his life. Tragically, his life was taken from him. Justice must now be served, end quote. In the days and weeks that followed, Ryan's family began the painful process of mourning. His father, Jay, took it especially hard. He later told the media that shortly after Ryan's death, he went to his son's condo and he laid down in Ryan's blood and screamed. And I know what type of scream this was, this mourning wail, this absolutely unhinged, something inside of me is broken and shattered and missing and will never be able to be replaced. Life will never be the same. I will never be the same. I will never see this person again. That kind of just heart-wrenching scream. And then Jay got up and scrubbed the walls and the floor. He said, quote, I just felt this need to take care of my son like I had for years. I didn't feel like it was right for anyone else to do it except me. No one was going to do that but me. I didn't want some stranger coming in there and seeing what happened to my child. I wanted it to go away, end quote. So the condo was never actually in Ryan's name. It was in his mother and stepfather's names, and obviously that condo would eventually have to be put on the market. But before the condo was sold, Jay would sometimes lie in Ryan's bed and talk to him. It brought him comfort. He kept Ryan's dog, Oliver, the Maltese Yorkie mix, and took Oliver almost everywhere. He said, quote, I see the spirit of Ryan in this little dog, end quote. Jay also held on to Ryan's clothes, his watch, and a few other personal items, anything that helped him feel close to his son. He said, quote, you tried to fill a void that cannot be filled. You have to do it. It's either that or you don't get out of bed for the rest of your life, end quote. While Ryan's family and detectives were certain his death was cold-blooded, calculated murder, proving it to a jury would be a whole different battle. It would take time and evidence to build a case that could hold up in court. So the investigation pressed on, and what they uncovered looked very, very bad for Shaina. The first step in building the case against Shaina was to fully process the crime scene. Ryan's condo was a mess, but not in the way you'd expect after a violent altercation. And according to his father, and we talked about this last time, Ryan was a bit of a messy guy, and detectives agreed that the overall disarray looked more like normal clutter than a scene of struggle. Now remember, Shaina had claimed that Ryan had thrown her into the television, but the TV was sitting exactly where it belonged. Untouched. It wasn't moved, it wasn't knocked over. It was also covered in a thin layer of dust. She also said that he slammed her into the bookshelf, but everything on the bookshelf, pipes, sunglasses, even upright bullets, perfectly undisturbed. You can't get thrown into a bookshelf and not have some things fall over or become displaced. Shaina had further claimed Ryan reached across the dining table for a gun, but there were prescription pill bottles standing upright on that table, and even those hadn't moved. So there didn't seem to be any, kind of tug of war battle over this gun. In short, none of her stories matched what police actually saw in the condo. Detectives collected the handgun Shaina had used to shoot Ryan along with the shell casings. They also found at least 3 other firearms in the condo. One of them was loaded and holstered to the side of Ryan's bed, which is going to become important later. By the time they left the scene, police were already skeptical. And then the autopsy results came in. Ryan had been shot 6 times, twice in the head, once under the arm, once in the back, and twice in the chest. He was seated for 3 of the shots. The other 3 came after he was on the floor. Four of the wounds had stippling, and that means Shaina fired them from at least less than 3 feet away. One shot was fired so close that Ryan's blood was found on the muzzle of the gun. The medical examiner couldn't say which shot had killed him, but all of them were survivable for a brief window, and Ryan was alive for every single shot. And then he bled to death on the dining room floor. And hearing that makes me wonder. Shaina was, not afraid of Ryan to the point where she was not afraid to get close to him with the gun. If he was still conscious and able to hurt her, then obviously she wouldn't have wanted to get close to him. He could have grabbed the gun, turned it on her. I think she watched him die. I think the first 3 shots where Ryan was sitting were out of anger, like an impulse thing. And then once those shots had been fired and he was unable to do anything and really even talk back or do anything, Shaina probably, in my opinion, this is just speculation, I have nothing to back this up, she probably sat there holding the gun, walking around him, talking shit to him, like, oh, how are you going to get on your date now? You're going to be late. Should we call Miss Ohio and let her know you're going to be late? Just talking shit, right? And then, not out of anger anymore, out of just maliciousness, she got close to him and shot him some more. So I think she sat there and watched him die. Now, a forensic expert named Howard Ryan was brought in to examine the scene and the autopsy. He concluded that the first shot was likely to Ryan's forehead while Ryan was seated at the table. Ryan is sitting down at the table when he's first shot. He's not standing up. He's not lunging towards Shaina. Once again, she can leave at any time. He's not attacking her. He's sitting at the table. After he was shot in the forehead, Ryan's head slumped forward onto the table, exposing the upper right part of his back. And that's where the next shot went. At the same time, Ryan's right arm dropped to the side, exposing the area beneath his armpit where Shaina fired again. After those 3 shots, Ryan fell out of his chair and hit the floor. That's when she shot him 3 more times while he was lying helpless and bleeding on the ground. The forensic expert Howard, he noted that when Shaina fired the shots, she was standing with the front door directly behind her. There was no obstruction between her and an exit. She could have walked away at any time, especially once she'd shot Ryan 3 times and he was on the floor. Howard's findings, along with the autopsy and evidence found at the crime scene, told detectives that Shaina was definitely lying. They felt like if her story had been true, if this really was self-defense, she could have stopped after the first shot, right? She shot him in the head. That first bullet to the head would have incapacitated Ryan, and she could have run out of the condo door. But she didn't stop. Instead, she moved closer and closer and kept firing, again and again and again, even as Ryan lay on the floor. That's not self-defense. It's murder. It's cold-blooded murder. The investigation continued as detectives began interviewing Ryan's neighbors. So the neighbors were Vernon and Doris. They'd lived in the condo directly below Ryan's for about a year and a half. They described Ryan as quiet. They said they rarely heard much from his apartment upstairs. No arguing, no loud music, no heavy footsteps. But that had changed in the 2 nights leading up to the shooting. On the evening of October 11th, this was the night before Ryan was killed, Doris said she heard a woman crying out on Ryan's back deck. Then she also heard a man's voice saying, "It's okay, it's okay." And then she couldn't hear anything after that. Remember, this is the night that Ryan and Shaina went to his parents' house to watch the presidential debate. And it is believed that they returned to the condo and Ryan broke up with Shaina for good. And that's also the night she called her mother Sharon crying. And then her mom drove over to Ryan's condo and stayed in Ryan's condo with Shaina while Ryan was locked in his bedroom because he was scared of Shaina. Doris also said that the following night, just minutes before Shaina called 911, she again heard a woman crying out on the back deck. This time she heard the sound of a chair scraping across the deck as if someone was standing up. Seconds later, she heard 2 gunshots. About 6 seconds after that, she heard 4 more. In between, there was a loud thump, like a body hitting the floor. At first, she and Vernon assumed the noise was fireworks, but the second burst of gunshots made them realize that something was wrong. But do you know what they didn't hear? They didn't hear yelling. They didn't hear screaming. They didn't hear sounds of a struggle. They didn't hear the sounds of a woman being thrown into bookshelves and dragged across the floor and tossed into the TV. They just heard a woman crying on the back patio, or like the balcony, followed by a chair scraping, sounded like someone was getting up, and then very shortly after that, gunshots. So what it sounds like is that Ryan and Shaina weren't fighting. He wasn't going after her. It sounds like Ryan broke up with Shaina the night before. She came over to his apartment to convince him to take her back like she had so many times. He said, "No, I'm not taking you back. I'm really done this time. And actually, I have a date tonight I have to get ready for. So, I would like for you to leave, but if you insist on staying here, I do have to go get ready." Then I think Ryan left Shaina out on the balcony, walked inside, and she was like, "Nope, we're not going out that way." She followed him in, grabbed the gun, and shot him. I think that's what happened. That's just my opinion. Now, Doris's husband, Vernon, he confirmed the sequence of sounds. He heard 2 shots, the thud of something heavy hitting the floor, and then 4 more gunshots. And like his wife, he said there was no commotion before or after the shooting. The lack of commotion heard by Vernon and Doris was yet another nail in the coffin for Shaina's self-defense story. Next, detectives turned to the people who knew Ryan and Shaina best, their family, friends, coworkers, and acquaintances. And one by one, they painted a picture of a relationship that was toxic, lopsided, and increasingly volatile. They told police how Shaina would show up at Ryan's work and his home uninvited, and how he'd sometimes have to lock himself in his room to escape her. How she bombarded him with texts and calls and emails, how she cried, manipulated, and begged every time he tried to leave. She impersonated other people through text so she could insult him. She showed up at his place at night and stayed until he gave in. Ryan had tried again and again to break things off, but Shaina always found her way back in. To continue building their case against Shaina, detectives reviewed more than 50,000 text messages and 20,000 Facebook messages between Shaina, Ryan, and their friends and family. What they found not only supported what people had already said, it also revealed just how unhealthy and obsessive this relationship had become. The messages included everything from Shaina professing her love to Ryan to openly admitting she hated him to her friends. She constantly complained that he didn't love her the way she loved him, and her tone could shift on a dime. And we already talked about that one especially disturbing exchange from the night that she and Ryan visited the shooting range, where Shaina texted her friend saying she wanted to turn around and shoot him. Obviously, detectives saw this not just as a red flag, but as a warning that had come and gone. As they kept digging, investigators discovered more messages that strengthened Shaina's motive, especially when it came to Ryan's new love interest, Audrey Bolte. So in her interrogation, remember, Shaina claimed she had no idea that Ryan had plans the night she went over to his house, October 12th. She had no idea that he was set to go on a date with Audrey Bolte, Miss Ohio. However, records disproved this. The records showed that Ryan and Audrey became Facebook friends on January 27th, 2012. And then just 2 days later, on January 29th, Shaina searched Audrey's name on Facebook. She did it again that June. And then just 2 days before the murder, on October 10th, Shaina downloaded a photo of Audrey to her phone. So what was going on here? Was Shaina stalking Ryan's profiles? Yes. Had she hacked into his Facebook and things so she could see who he was talking to? I don't think so. I think, and detectives also believe, that Shaina had been monitoring Ryan's social media and she's watching his follower count. So she's watching how many people he follows, how many people follow him, and she's watching to see when that number changes. And then she's going to go and check and see who these new people are. And then she's going to go stalk those new people. So through that, and somehow, I'm not sure exactly how, but Shaina figured out that he was planning to go on a date with Audrey on the 12th. Given her past behavior, stalking Ryan's page, obsessing over who he was with, showing up uninvited, even stalking his ex-girlfriends, it wasn't a stretch to think she'd seen something that confirmed, honestly, her worst fear, which was that Ryan had a date with a very lovely young woman who he'd probably get along with, and he could be moving on for good. And this pushed Shaina to the edge. There was more, though. Investigators examined Shaina's internet search history and found that during the window of time she would have been arguing with Ryan, right, just before the shooting, the time when she claimed he was throwing her around the apartment and doing crazy things with his arm, she actually was on the internet searching how to unlock a door with a bobby pin. Yep. So this led detectives and everybody with a brain to believe that Ryan had retreated into his bedroom to get away from her, like he had done so many times in the past, probably to get dressed, lock himself in, get dressed, and then leave the apartment, just like I said, while she sat on the balcony, sniffling and crying and Google searching how to unlock a door with a bobby pin. And this detail matters for so many reasons, but two major reasons. First, if Shaina's story is true about being physically attacked, why would the alleged aggressor stop in the middle of the attack to go lock himself in a bedroom? And why wouldn't the victim then take that chance to escape, to get out, not say to herself, I'm not done with being physically abused. I'm going to look up and see how I can get into his bedroom to continue this. Now, second reason this matters is detectives had already found a loaded gun in a holster attached to Ryan's bed. So if he'd really been threatening Shaina with a gun, wouldn't it have made more sense for him to just grab the one next to him in the bedroom instead of, bringing the argument to the dining room and going for the gun that he had sitting on the dining room table? Detectives also discovered that between the time Ryan was shot and the moment Shaina finally called 911, there was an unexplained gap of about 10 to 15 minutes. And Shaina had made another call first. She didn't call the police first. She called her mother, Sharon. Police later interviewed Sharon, who said her daughter was hysterical, terrified, and in shock. Shaina told Sharon that she'd shot Ryan in self-defense, and Sharon told her to call 911 right away and tell them exactly what had happened, which was the right thing to do, Shaina. 10 to 15 minutes between when Ryan was shot when Shaina called the police. And I think that time was spent calling her mom, hoping her mom was like, just get out of there. Pretend you were never there. Like, it'll be like it never happened. And also, like I said, I think some time was spent talking shit to Ryan and just trying to really rub salt in the wounds. That delay and the choice to call her mom first, it added another layer of suspicion to what was already looking like a calculated murder. After reviewing all of this evidence, the narrative became clear. This wasn't a case of sudden rage or a split-second decision made to protect oneself. This was a case of obsession. A woman who couldn't take no for an answer, because she never had to before. A woman who refused to be replaced. If I can't have you, no one can. To detectives, it looked like a textbook fatal attraction. Ryan had tried to end the relationship. Shaina wasn't going to let him. And while she hadn't turned this violent during their previous breakups, this time it felt different to her. Ryan was actually done. He had a date with someone new. All the other times, she would get broken up with and then go over to Ryan's and cry, and he would cave and give in. But this time he was like, listen, you can sit out here on the balcony and cry if you want, but I got to go in and get ready for my date. Ryan was moving on for real. And if you've ever been in that position, you know what it feels like when you're emotionally done with somebody, when you're emotionally checked out. It's like this sudden switch goes off. I'm done. I can't take anymore. The other person can usually sense that as well. Police believed that what pushed Shaina over the edge was not just jealousy, but the realization that she'd lost control, that her power over Ryan was gone. And that, in her mind, was a failure. Shaina didn't fail. Ryan wasn't killed in self-defense. He was killed because Shaina didn't want anyone else to have him. Detectives believed the murder was cold, calculated, and planned. And in most states, it would be charged as first-degree murder, but in Kentucky, there are no degrees of murder. There's just murder, manslaughter in the first, or second degree, and reckless homicide. But still, the facts spoke for themselves. Shaina didn't kill Ryan because she was afraid of him. She killed him because she couldn't stand to see him with someone else. She couldn't stand what that reality did to her ego, her identity, her sense of self. That's murder, plain and simple. Now, at this point, detectives had thoroughly dismantled Shaina's version of events, but there was still one more claim to address: her assertion that Ryan was whacked out on drugs the night she killed him. Investigators looked into it and found that while Ryan did have a history of misusing prescription medications, that history still didn't support Shaina's version of what happened. Through texts and messages, police learned that Ryan had been taking dextrostat. It's an amphetamine used to treat ADHD. He was also taking Xanax, Ambien, Lexapro, and Accutane. And in one message, Ryan wrote, quote, "I take dextrostat every day to get me up. I take Xanax and Ambien every night to put me to sleep. Accutane for the acne and Lexapro for the depression. I'm highly medicated, uppers and downers, story of my life," end quote. He described a cycle that left him exhausted, saying, quote, "I can't sleep without Xanax and Ambien and can't get anything accomplished without amphetamines," end quote. In another message, he said, quote, "Admittedly, I owe a lot to the uppers and downers. I never could have made it through law school and built my law firm without them. But at about 8 o'clock every night, I feel like impaling my forehead on a spike," end quote. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's not a lot of medication. Xanax, Ambien, stimulant for ADHD, Lexapro for depression. It's a lot of medication, but a lot of people are on all of those medications at the same time. A lot of people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, I guarantee you, are on all of those medications currently as we speak. Because if you don't understand, you don't understand. But to have unmedicated ADHD is torture. Right? Your brain's going in a million different directions all the time. You can't get anything done. If you're a high achiever, if you're someone like Ryan, who is doing a lot of things, making a lot of moves, had a lot of hopes and dreams and aspirations for himself, it's torture. It feels like you can't function. Your brain doesn't work. To have unmedicated anxiety, torture, right? And a lot of the anxiety will sometimes come from the ADHD because you're missing deadlines and you're dropping the ball and you're not filing your taxes on time and your bills are late and you don't know why you just can't get things right. Unmedicated depression, torture, right? So yes, he was a young man who was going through a lot of things in his life, a lot of stuff happening, and he was taking a lot of medication. But why should he be judged for that? Why does that make him a violent person who would suddenly take it into his head to throw his ex-girlfriend around his townhouse? So when Ryan says something like, "I felt like at 8 o'clock every night, I feel like driving my head into a spike," this isn't a violent sentiment. I feel the same way when my Adderall wears off and it's too early to go to sleep and you still have things to do. Yeah, you feel like impaling your forehead on a spike. I completely understand that. You just want your brain to do what you want it to do. Ryan also expressed frustration with his mental health, saying, quote, "I think that my brain lesions have definitely affected my cognitive function. The copious amounts of Xanax I ingest can't help either. I never have enough Ambien to make it a month," end quote. And Ryan spoke openly about self-medicating with alcohol and pills, texting, quote, "3 Xanax and 2 Ambien later, I really should be asleep. I took 3 Ambien, 3 Xanax, a Klonopin, and eventually a shot of vodka. I was honestly concerned that I was going to kill myself, but I had to be in court at 9, end quote. Damn. I mean, What did he say? 3 Xanax and 3 Ambien? Yeah, 3 Xanax, 3 Ambien, and a Klonopin? I mean, I'm not even concerned about the shot of vodka at this point. The shot of vodka is nothing compared to the amount of, wow, 3 Ambien, 3 Xanax, and a Klonopin? Damn, that is a lot. That's a lot. He said, I honestly was concerned that I was going to kill myself. And I am surprised. I could never take that much. I could never take that many benzos. That's insane. I would be out in like a light. Yeah, but he had to be at court at 9, right? So you can see. And if you start taking this medication a lot, all of these medications, at least in my experience, have, a period where they work really well. And then the more you take them, the more your body develops a tolerance and you feel like you have to take more and more to get the same effect. And he's thinking in his head, his type A ADHD head, I got to be at court at 9. I don't have a choice. I have to go to sleep. I can't be up all night. I need to be functioning well for my clients tomorrow. And he also did note the toll that stimulants were taking on his mood. He said, quote, Adderall to get shit done every day is fucking killing me. I'm literally just walking around growling at people, end quote. I kind of get what he means. By that. But once again, this isn't a violent, like growling at people, like I'm going to beat someone up. This is like, if you don't have ADHD, you don't understand, but it is literally how you sometimes feel when you're on Adderall. It just is, especially if someone interrupts your hyperfocus. I've growled at many a person who interrupted my hyperfocus because you're so focused on what you're doing, you can't even get words out. You're just caveman mode to whoever's coming in, having the audacity to talk to you while you're typing on your computer, while you're clearly typing on your computer. So anyways, Ryan's friend Allie later said she believed Ryan had abused pills months prior to his death in order to cope with stress from that ongoing lawsuit with his former business partner. But she insisted at the time of his death, quote, he was still normal. I mean, I saw him the day before he died, and he was fine, end quote. And while Ryan obviously did abuse prescription medication, those texts were sent months before he died. And if that's not enough for you, at the time of his death, Ryan's toxicology report, it showed that he was only positive for benzos and amphetamine. So basically his anxiety medication and his ADHD. Overall, it didn't appear that prescription drugs, played any role in Ryan's death. It was a red herring, and ultimately the court agreed. They ended up excluding most of that drug-related evidence from the trial. Shaina's attempt to paint Ryan as unstable was another failed attempt to shift the blame. At this point, detectives were certain that Shaina Hubers had not killed Ryan Poston in self-defense. They believed that on October 12, 2012, Ryan came home after work to get ready for his date with Audrey. But Shaina was there waiting. She'd shown up uninvited again because Ryan had broken up with her the night before. An argument broke out, and as Shaina grew increasingly volatile, Ryan locked himself in his bedroom to get away. But Shaina wouldn't let him go. She picked the lock with a bobby pin and continued the fight. And at that point, Ryan probably left his bedroom because Shaina's entering his room and he doesn't want to be caged in. He wants to go out to the more common space area. So they ended up in the dining room. After Ryan sat down at the table, such a threatening pose, Shaina grabbed his gun off the dining room table and shot him multiple times. When he collapsed on the floor, she moved closer, shot him even more times. By the end of October, Shaina's preliminary hearing was held, and her parents sat in the front row, as close to her as the court would allow. Shaina's defense attorney asked for a reduced bond, but the judge was not buying it. The judge wasn't moved. Citing the danger that Shaina posed to the community, he revoked her bond completely. And Shaina made multiple attempts to have that decision reversed, but the bond was never regranted, especially after one hearing where it came to light that she had openly discussed the possibility of escaping with her mom if she was released. This is a real big pattern of just not feeling that you should be held accountable for anything, not feeling that you deserve any repercussions for your actions. And as the years passed, Shaina sat in jail awaiting trial where, surprise, surprise, she still couldn't stop talking. In fact, she shared so much about Ryan's murder that 3 of her former cellmates eventually came forward. This was Donna Dooley, Holly Nivens, and Cecily Miller, and they each told prosecutors what Shaina had told them. Donna said Shaina claimed she shot Ryan because he wanted her to leave so he could go on his date. Shaina said that Ryan had set his gun on the dining table. She picked it up and asked, "What would you do if I..." And then he smirked at her. And when he smirked at her, she pulled the trigger. So probably Shaina was about to say, "What would you do if I pointed this at you or shot you?" And he smirked at her. Probably like, he wouldn't do that. Like, that's ridiculous. It's crazy even for you, Shaina. And then she pulled the trigger, right? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how hillbilly I am. Shaina also bragged that she'd thrown things around Ryan's condo on purpose to make it seem like a struggle had taken place. And Donna said that Shaina showed zero remorse for what she had done to Ryan. When she was talking about killing Ryan, she was not remorseful, not regretful, not sad, not looking at it as like, "Oh, I can't believe I did this." Kind of the behavior we saw in the interrogation room where she's cracking jokes that she wants the police officers to recognize the cleverness of her jokes. And maybe now she's in prison and she's like, "These are fellow criminals. They'll get my jokes." But no. Holly told prosecutors that Shaina had even admitted Ryan hadn't abused her at all on the night of October 12th. Shaina told her that she'd broken into Ryan's room with a bobby pin after he had gone in there and locked her out. She also confessed to staging bruises on her arms and trashing the condo to make it look like Ryan was abusive. Holly also told prosecutors about Shaina's behavior in jail. She said that Shaina would be on the jail phone, probably talking to her parents, who believe everything she says, and then she would turn around and wink or smile at the other inmates once the call ended. She's manipulative. This is like the high level of manipulation. This is Casey Anthony level manipulation. Now, according to Holly, Shaina even told her she was studying Jodi Arias's murder trial for inspiration. Holly said, quote, "She was so wrapped up in her case, comparing herself with Jodi Arias and writing down every single detail," end quote. Why would you research that case? Why would you do it? Like, I understand there's similarities between you two ladies. No one can deny it. But why would you spend your time researching her case? Because Jodi Arias didn't win her case. She didn't. She's in prison. As many of you know, during Jodi's trial, she claimed that her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, had abused her on multiple occasions. But none of those allegations were ever substantiated. Just like Shaina's allegations against Ryan were never substantiated. And like Shaina, Jodi also claimed she acted in self-defense, but the jury didn't buy it. She was ultimately convicted of first-degree premeditated murder. If Shaina was obsessed with Jodi's case, then she would have seen that Jodi's defense, her domestic violence self-defense claim, that did not work for her because there was no evidence. And with Shaina and Ryan, there was no evidence of domestic violence. So inmate Cecily told prosecutors that Shaina laughed when she talked about killing Ryan. Shaina told her that she knew he was planning to go on a date with Miss Ohio and that she shot him after he asked her to leave. Cecily said Shaina even planned to lie and claimed that Ryan had raped and beaten her. She said Shaina showed no remorse and that everything she did was calculated. Cecily said, quote, "She said she was going to plead insanity, but she was too smart because she has the IQ of Einstein. So she was going to plead battered wife syndrome," end quote. The IQ of Einstein? Oh, good Lord. Now, each of these women described a version of Shaina that was disturbingly different from the one she tried to present to police. Tried to, because like I said, some of this like laughter and happiness and just her amusement at what she had done, it did come through in her interrogation. But she wasn't a terrified woman trying to escape abuse. She was a manipulative killer trying to rewrite the ending, and soon she'd have to try to sell that story in court. Shaina's trial began in April of 2015, 2.5 years after Ryan was killed inside his Highland Heights condo. Media coverage from inside the courtroom was limited, as the presiding judge allowed only one television camera inside the courtroom and one positioned outside. Live broadcasts and real-time social media updates were banned. The jury was seated in just 7 hours, and it was made up of 8 men and 6 women, described as overwhelmingly white and middle-aged, with only 3 jurors close in age to Shaina and Ryan. And over the course of 9 days, more than 40 witnesses took the stand, and over 100 pieces of evidence were introduced. Tensions ran high in the courtroom as the prosecution and defense sparred over the events that led up to Ryan's death. But one thing both sides agreed on was that Shaina was the one who pulled the trigger. What the jury had to decide was why. Was it a cold-blooded murder, or was it self-defense? Jurors were told that they could weigh a range of possible verdicts: not guilty by self-defense, murder, manslaughter, or reckless homicide. The prosecution was led by Michelle Snodgrass, a seasoned and tough litigator who, like Ryan himself, had graduated from Chase Law. She didn't mince words. She told the jury that Shaina was guilty of murder. She said, quote, Ryan Poston wanted to stop dating Shaina Hubers, but Shaina Hubers did not want to stop dating Ryan Poston. She would not accept no as an answer. End quote. And the state's case focused a lot on motive, specifically Shaina's escalating obsession that had turned into hatred. They pointed out that a few weeks before Ryan's death, Shaina had texted a friend saying she wanted to shoot Ryan at the gun range. Prosecutors believed that by then, the idea of killing Ryan had already taken root, making what happened on October 12th a premeditated murder. Shaina was spiraling in a sea of hatred, and meanwhile, Ryan was preparing to move on. He had started talking to Miss Ohio, Audrey Bolte, and Audrey took the stand. She talked about Ryan. She said things between them were just starting. She never even got to meet him in person.
He was very funny and very smart, and I found him very entertaining. And that led me to accept an invite to go on a date.
The prosecution told the jury that when Shaina learned that Ryan had made plans to go on a date with another woman on October 12th, she snapped. Snodgrass said, quote, she knew that Ryan Poston had somewhere else that he had to be and someone else that he was meeting, end quote. Obviously, this would all be too much for Shaina to handle. There's a lot of reasons for that. We're going to go over that later, but she wasn't used to being told no. She couldn't stand the idea that someone else could have Ryan, that he would choose someone else over her. Law enforcement officers walked the jury through the inconsistencies in Shaina's story and how her explanations of the shooting never lined up with the evidence. They also went over clips of her odd behavior in the interrogation room, and her defense team had fought hard to have those clips excluded, claiming Shaina's rights had been violated because the interview continued after she requested an attorney. But the prosecutors were like, what are you talking about? This wasn't even an interrogation. She said she wanted a lawyer, and we were like, okay, we can't ask you any questions then. And then Shaina had kept talking voluntarily. Remember, the detectives had taken to calling this the Shaina Hubers show, and they felt that interrupting her would have been ruining her performance. Now, the judge did allow the interview footage, which showed Shaina's fake tears, musical performances, and more. It was the perfect way to show the jury how Shaina didn't act like someone who'd just killed another person in self-defense. And then the 3 women who were incarcerated with Shaina, they were also allowed to testify. So for the jury, each woman recounted how Shaina admitted to staging parts of the scene, mocking Ryan's death, showing no remorse, and their accounts lined up with each other. But not only that, their accounts also lined up with what the detectives uncovered during their investigation. And this obviously gave the prosecution powerful testimony that Shaina's self-defense claim was a lie, like a cruel lie, hurled against somebody who wasn't even there to defend himself. The prosecution ended its case with 2 of the most powerful voices in the courtroom, Ryan's mother and father. Both spoke about the pain of watching their son endure a volatile relationship that he had been trying to end. His mother recalled how Shaina had sat at her kitchen table the night before the murder, pretending everything was normal. And that image of Shaina sitting there calmly, knowing what she was going to do, it haunted Ryan's mother. It drove home the coldness behind Ryan's death and how deeply betrayed they felt. The defense was led by David Mejia, who had been hired by Shaina's parents. Of course he was. And as expected, the defense leaned hard on the claim of self-defense, but they didn't stop there. Shaina's attorneys tried to shift the narrative entirely, casting Ryan as a man spiraling under the weight of professional stress and prescription drug use. They called him volatile. They called him aggressive and unstable. They claimed that despite Shaina's obsessive behavior, she wasn't a murderer. I mean, that's your typical one, after all. Just a woman pushed to the edge. According to their theory, Ryan had been in a drug-fueled rage the night that he died. He was overwhelmed with work stress and mentally unraveling. But the toxicology showed that he wasn't in a drug-fueled rage that day, and he wasn't really dealing with any work stress at that point. That had sort of resolved itself. But still, the defense read text messages that Ryan had sent to friends completely out of context, including the one that said, "My brain has a tripwire in there somewhere, and if it snaps, I worry what could happen." And they pointed to this as evidence that Ryan was the real threat that night, which is so ridiculous. First of all, once again, out of context, he was talking about his issues with the other attorney, his old partner who was suing him. And people say stuff like that all the time. It's like, I'm going to crash out. I'm going to snap. I say that at least 17 times a day. I don't mean it. It's like just a dramatic over-exaggeration because you just feel so like burnt out and overwhelmed. But my brain has a tripwire in it and I'm going to snap. How many of us say we're going to snap every day? How many times do we snap? Not as many times as we say we're going to, okay? So according to Shaina's attorneys, it was kill or be killed. They said Ryan snapped the tripwire, it tripped, and he snapped, and that she was forced to protect herself. I literally don't even know the audacity that these people have, this defense team has, of like coming in and making all these claims that are not supported by evidence at all, because the defense team claimed that Shaina shot Ryan while he was standing, first in the head, then 5 more times as he continued to come at her. What? They said she had been lying on the floor while Ryan stood by the table, and that every shot she fired was out of fear. There's a lot of problems with this argument. Number one being Shaina's own statements to the police, because remember, in her interview, she said Ryan was almost in a sitting position at the table when she picked up the gun. She showed how he was sitting, and she was like, then I shot him, and then his head fell forward, and that's when I knew he was dead. She never mentioned that she was on the floor. What are we talking about here? What are we making stuff up for now? Her version had already shifted so many times, and this new one contradicted not only her previous statements, not just statement, but statements. She'd never said this before the trial, but also the physical evidence as well, right? The ballistics, which showed that Ryan was shot when he was sitting down. And then the shots didn't come from the floor where Shaina allegedly now was laying. So to counter the prosecution's argument that Shaina could have simply walked away when Ryan was locked in his room or even after the first shot, the defense brought up Kentucky's stand your ground law. Under that law, a person does not have a duty to retreat before using deadly force if they believe it's necessary to prevent death or serious injury. Which is so dumb, because if you have the ability to retreat, that's your way that you prevent death or serious injury, And I think a lot of the time, stand your ground, if I remember correctly, and don't hold me to this, but I thought that was like if there was somebody else that you had to protect, like you could get away, but you didn't want to leave somebody else behind, or maybe you thought this person would pursue you or something like that. And it's like Ryan's locking himself in his bedroom. The defense has acknowledged this at this point, right? They can't not. There's too much evidence to show that he did it. He was locking himself in his bedroom. He was no danger to you. You could have left. Even with that argument, which is a terrible one, but what else are they going to do with Shaina as a client? The timing of the shots, Shaina's own behavior in the days before and after the murder, everything. It made it increasingly difficult for the jury to buy what Shaina and the defense was selling. Now, Shaina never took the stand in her own defense, but later on, we're going to see her take the stand, and she's going to be questioned, grilled, roasted by Michelle Snodgrass, the district attorney, the prosecutor. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, but we'll get there eventually. But throughout the trial, Shaina often appeared remarkably unfazed. Casey Anthony behavior. She was seen laughing with her loved ones, casually chatting with her legal team, and at times looking more like a spectator than someone on trial for murder. Smiling. She's just very chill, very chill. And the first witness called by the defense was Shaina's mother, Sharon. That was the best they could do. I'm just going to make that very clear to you, by the way. The police interviewed a lot of people that Shaina knew, people that Ryan knew. Most of those people didn't say anything bad about Ryan. Some of those people said some things that were concerning about Shaina, but there wasn't really many character witnesses that Shaina could have, because I think that the people who knew her well or knew her the most, when they heard what had happened to Ryan and they heard that Shaina was being accused with doing it, they were like, That actually checks out. So Shayna's mother, Sharon, she made it clear that she wanted the jury to understand the daughter she knew, bright, accomplished, and full of promise. Sharon described Shaina as brilliant, said she was proud of her in every way. She also testified about her deep discomfort with Ryan from the very beginning. Sharon said she found Ryan's condo nasty and was alarmed by the number of guns he kept there. She claimed Ryan would pick up a firearm and shoot books off a shelf, sometimes while Shaina was present in the home. And if I'm being sort of callous towards Sharon, listen, she's allowed to see her daughter the way she sees her daughter. If you want to see your daughter as bright and full of promise and kind and generous and all of these things, that's fine. I'm sure that's very hard for you. You have no right to now turn around and talk shit about Ryan, okay? His apartment was messy. That was a red flag right there. That single male bachelor kept his apartment like a single male bachelor would. Red flag, definitely an abuser. And then she said Ryan would sometimes shoot books off the bookshelf in his apartment. And sometimes he would do that while Shaina was there. Like, I don't believe this at all. First of all, that's stupid. Anybody who knows anything about gun safety, which Ryan did, would know that was stupid. Ricochet, anything could happen. Just the damage to the apartment that could potentially happen. And Ryan was so close to his parents, and his mother and stepfather owned that condo. He wouldn't be shooting at books. If he was shooting at books, there's very likely some bullets that would have gone through the books and into the wall. So were there bullet holes all over Ryan's townhouse? This is just, it feels like at this point, okay, Sharon, you have the right to defend your daughter, but you don't have the right to slander the name of the person your daughter killed simply because you want to defend your daughter blindly. Two things can be true at once. You can say that was wrong what she did. I don't support what she did, but in my eyes, she will always be my loving, beautiful, full of promise daughter who I'll always be there for and support. That's what a mentally healthy person does. But it's honestly not surprising to me based on how Shaina was raised. So Sharon also recalled receiving 2 phone calls from Shaina on October 12th. The first was in the early morning hours when Shaina called sounding sick and distraught. And remember, Sharon said she went over to Ryan's condo to check on her daughter, found Ryan locked in his bedroom. What a scary, abusive man. He's locked in his bedroom. Was that a red flag to you as well? Oh, and then she had to spend the night in Ryan's disgusting apartment. So the second call came later that evening. Obviously, that's the call that happened after the shooting when Shaina told her mother that she had shot Ryan in self-defense, and Sharon described Shaina as hysterical, panicked, and completely besides herself. Quote, she was a mess, end quote, Sharon said. Yeah. All right. She told her daughter to call 911, report exactly what had happened, and to support the idea that Shaina had endured abuse and that her fear of Ryan was legitimate. The defense also called Shaina's friend Tina, who painted Shaina as a gentle and kind person, not the obsessive and controlling woman portrayed by prosecutors and the police and everyone else who knew Shaina. So Tina testified that Shaina once confided in her about a sexual encounter with Ryan that allegedly turned violent. And Tina recounted Shaina's words, quote, Tina, I was screaming, I was crying. He pushed my face into a pillow so I wouldn't yell so loud. I said no, I said stop. End quote. Yeah, I don't know why Tina was even allowed to be a witness because this is hearsay. I heard Shaina tell me that this is just basically like Shaina testifying, but literally the defense couldn't really get anyone to testify on behalf of Shaina. So I guess even the judge was probably like, I mean, this is hearsay. But whatever, let them have it. They don't have anyone else. The defense also called a toxicologist who reviewed Ryan's autopsy results and testified that a mix of prescription medications, benzos, amphetamine found in Ryan's system could have triggered behavioral changes. Could have. Yes, could have. Anything could have done anything. Now, according to the expert, the combination of drugs could result in behavioral discontrol and hostile outbursts. And he suggested that Ryan's mental state may have been unpredictable or volatile at the time of the shooting. This is the defense's witness. So the defense's witness is going to come on and say basically whatever. So if there's even one study that shows mixing, something like Adderall and Xanax could potentially cause volatile behavior, of course it could. But do you know how many people are on Adderall and Xanax at the same time? Like, they're not taking it at the same time necessarily, but, Adderall during the day to work and then Xanax at night to take the anxiety down, help you sleep. So many people. So many people. So that's just absolutely ridiculous. Doctors wouldn't prescribe these things together if it was such a high incidence that you would just all of a sudden walk in your apartment and start throwing people into bookshelves and TVs. It's absolutely ridiculous. But once again, they're just trying to plant a little seed in the jury's mind like, well, it could have happened. It could have. It didn't work. But also to bolster their argument that Ryan could have still posed a danger to Shaina after she shot him in the face, in the head, the defense brought in another expert witness, Dr. George Nichols, a former state medical examiner. He testified that the injuries Ryan sustained, while ultimately fatal, may not have rendered him immediately incapacitated. He got shot in the face, in the head. That was the first shot. Dr. Nichols, if that even is your real name. Dr. Nichols said, quote, he could move. The chest wounds, the front and back wounds, the armpit wounds, they would not cause him to lose the ability to walk, at least some, or move some, end quote. He got shot in the face and then shot 5 more times after that. So yeah, was he still alive? I guess, so could he maybe have moved a little bit? Maybe. Once again, it's possible. Did he pose a threat to Shaina at that point? No. So the final witness for the defense was psychologist Dr. Ed Connor, and he had spent 12 hours across 9 sessions evaluating Shaina between November 2012 and June 2014. As a part of his assessment, Dr. Connor administered an IQ test to determine whether Shaina was competent to stand trial, and she scored a 125. And that's good. It's like, a little bit above average. I think the normal or average IQ for people in the United States is like 115 or 120. But you know what it's not? It's not genius level. It's not the 160 IQ Shaina bragged about having that made her Einstein. So maybe she wasn't as smart as we thought. Maybe she was just really good at like school and education and stuff. Now, here's the interesting thing. Dr. Connor ultimately diagnosed Shaina with bipolar disorder and also an undefined personality disorder with narcissistic features and post-traumatic stress disorder due to sexual abuse she had suffered in high school before meeting Ryan. He told the jury, quote, she comes across as somewhat self-centered. She's a very intelligent woman with many academic achievements and wanted very much to talk about that. As I sat and listened, I realized she did not understand how she was perceived by others, end quote. She lacks self-awareness. She doesn't understand how she's perceived by others. She didn't realize that other people don't want to talk exclusively about her and her accomplishments. That's not what that dude's there to do, my friend. He's there to tell you which kind of crazy you are. And this psychologist added, quote, I think Shaina was a person who had extreme difficulty with rejection and tolerating it, end quote. I mean, I could have saved the defense money because I think every single one of us watching it, that's an obvious statement, right? You think she has difficulty with rejection and tolerating it? On cross-examination, Dr. Connor clarified that while these diagnoses might help explain some of Shaina's behavior, they did not excuse murder. Now, here's the interesting thing. Dr. Connor says she's bipolar. I disagree. And we're going to talk about this later because there's going to be another, trial, yes, where Shaina will be examined by more mental health professionals, and they're going to come up with the disorder I believe Shaina actually had. And listen, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I've done a lot of research about this. I've gone into it a lot. It's picture perfect, the combination of things that was going on with Shaina that led her to do what she did. So what I mean to say is, whether it's bipolar or NPD or BPD or depression, anxiety, whatever kind of mental health issue you have, that issue alone is not going to cause you to go out and murder someone. So I definitely don't ever want to paint a picture of people with mental illnesses as they're all dangerous and need to be avoided. That's not true. So be very clear about that. That's not true. And I so often feel that a lot of these criminal cases lead to that, where either they're trying to use the mental illness as a way to make the person, seem guilty and dangerous, or the defendant, the person who's being accused, will pretend to have a mental illness to explain away and excuse their behavior and try to get some leniency. I don't like either of those things. Okay, this is a very complicated, gray area situation. What was going on with Shaina was a cocktail of things that developed into what they developed into. And remember, Dr. Connor said bipolar, which I don't agree with, and then he said an undefined personality disorder with narcissistic features. Remember that. So after Dr. O'Connor testified, the defense rested. Then came time for the prosecution's rebuttal. Michelle Snodgrass reminded the jury that no one was disputing the emotional strain Ryan Poston was under in the months before his death. Yes, he was facing a lawsuit from his former law partner. Yes, he was navigating a challenging time in his career, but as Snodgrass pointed out, his rage was never directed at Shaina in any of his messages. His rage was never really directed at anyone. It was more directed towards himself, honestly. And as an ADHD person, I get that. So to reinforce their case, the prosecution also played the full 2.5-hour police interview recorded after the shooting. The same footage where Shaina claimed she was a good actress, where she stopped crying instantly when police left the room, where she danced, sang, laughed. Watching it in full painted a clear picture of how Shaina responded to taking another human life. And after the video ended, Snodgrass addressed the jury again, saying, quote, "She showed us that she's a liar. She showed us that she's a manipulator. And most importantly, what she showed us on October 12th is that she's a murderer," end quote. Mic drop, right? Damn. Both sides delivered powerful closing arguments. To drive their point home, each side reenacted their version of the shooting, and the prosecution had the actual dining room table and chair from Ryan's condo brought to the courtroom still stained with his blood, and they used these props, even though they're not props, they're real things. They used these to demonstrate how Ryan had been sitting when he was first shot. Then he fell to the floor where he was shot again. Now, the defense acted out their theory as well. They claimed, like I said, Shaina had been laying on the floor when she fired the fatal shots at Ryan, who was still standing. Snodgrass wasn't having it. When it was the prosecution's turn to respond, she picked up a prop gun and walked the jury through the physical evidence again. She said, quote, "The trajectory was in a downward angle. There's no way that from the ground that shot occurred. It's just not physically possible," end quote. It was Ryan who was on the ground, and Shaina was standing over him, shooting him for no other reason than she's a banana split sundae with extra nuts. The facts just didn't support Shaina's version. The science didn't support Shaina's version. The evidence didn't support Shaina's version. And all of that made everything painfully clear. On April 23rd, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Shaina Hubers was guilty of the murder of Ryan Poston. The courtroom fell silent as the decision was read aloud. Shaina's mother later described the moment as surreal. She said, quote, "I was terrified, and it was surreal. I didn't see how on earth that could have been the outcome," end quote. I see that delusion runs in the family, Sharon. How did you sit through that trial and still at the end of it walk around dazed and confused, like, how could that have possibly been the outcome? Did you hear what the jury heard? I don't get it. But for Ryan's family, it was a verdict that confirmed what they had known all along. This wasn't self-defense. It was murder. Now, court reconvened the next morning, this time to determine Shaina's sentence. Now, unlike most states where sentencing is typically handled by a judge, Kentucky is one of just a few states where juries decide a defendant's punishment, even in non-capital cases. Also, Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, I think they all do that, where the jury decides and then the judge has to approve it. The jury's decision is formally considered a recommendation, but I do know in Kentucky, judges almost never go against the jury's recommendation. So the stakes were pretty high. The prosecution was asking the jury to sentence Shaina to life in prison. Ryan's family obviously echoed that plea. They took the stand and spoke about the gravity of what had been taken from them. Ryan's sister told the jury, quote, "When you never get to say bye to someone and you know that they were in so much pain, your heart is breaking. Your heart actually feels like it's crumbling in your chest. Your heart feels empty. I never got to say goodbye to my brother. I never got to hug my brother one last time. He made us complete. Without him, there's always the chair that is going to be empty. He will never be able to get married. He'll never be able to have kids. He'll never be able to go to his kids' baseball games. He will never be able to have all the things he deserved to have in his life. End quote. Shaina's defense team, they asked for leniency. They wanted the judge to consider Shaina's accomplishments and good deeds. And her mother, Sharon, testified that her daughter Shaina deserved a second chance. Sharon told the jury that Shaina could be rehabilitated in prison and still had value to contribute. Why would you ask for leniency? It's absolutely insane to me. You killed someone in cold blood, and it's been proven that they weren't a risk or a threat to you, and you're still having the balls to ask for leniency instead of once again taking accountability and being like, well, I guess I'll serve my time. For Ryan's loved ones, the harm had already been done, and no amount of good deeds or potential could undo it. In the end, the jury recommended that Shaina be sentenced to 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20. Oh, and this is so frustrating, and it's the Casey Anthony effect. I literally think that when juries see these little girls, 120 pounds soaking wet, like, oh, how can we put her in prison for life? How can we find her guilty? It's just so annoying to me. 40 years with the possibility of parole after 20. Now, Shaina's formal sentencing, that where the judge would hand down her sentence, that was scheduled for a few months later. And outside the courtroom, Ryan's parents spoke to the reporters. And when they were asked how they felt about the sentence, Lisa said simply, quote, shallow victory. Our son is dead. End quote. Ryan's father, Jay, added, quote, never for 1 second did we ever think that there was any physical violence from a young man who had a kind and gentle heart, end quote. When they were asked how they planned to move forward, Jay answered, 1 day at a time. And Lisa nodded and echoed him, saying quietly, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, end quote. On August 14th, Shaina returned to court for her sentencing hearing, and this time she took the stand herself, hoping the judge would classify her as a victim of domestic violence, even though we just proved that there was no evidence of that. So if the judge agreed to classify her that way, Shaina would become eligible for parole after serving just 20% of her sentence. That would mean that there was the possibility of her release in as little as 8 years, 6 if you count time already served. So to qualify for this, Shaina had to prove 2 things, which honestly she could never have approved, and she had already been disproven. I don't know what we're doing all of this for, but she had to prove 2 things. She had to prove that she had been abused by Ryan and that the 2 of them had lived together. Both would be difficult to prove, obviously. One, we already agreed that there's no evidence of that, but the second part, that was also going to be a major problem. In her police interview the night of the murder, Shaina had clearly stated that she didn't live with Ryan. Still, and I understand last-ditch effort, throw it at the wall, see if it sticks, Jose Baez, that shit. Still, Shaina tried to make the judge believe they had lived together. On the stand, Shaina described how she had bought items for Ryan's apartment, how she had spent holidays with his family, and even fostered a kitten with him. Oh, sounds like you guys were in a relationship. She read aloud text messages that she claimed showed a shared domestic life. So in the text messages, Shaina's texting Ryan and she's like, hey, I'm going to fry boneless chicken for dinner tonight. Does that sound good? And Ryan responded back, sounds good. Yeah, you guys live together. She's cooking you dinner, breaking into your apartment when you don't even want her there. And yeah, that means you're living together. I think this is really great evidence. When the prosecutor, Michelle Snodgrass, cross-examined Shaina, the tone shifted. Snodgrass brought up evidence that Shaina had also been seeing other men while supposedly living with Ryan. She asked Shaina, quote, were you with 10 other men during this whole time that we're talking about, during 2012? 10 different men? End quote. Shaina pushed back. And Shaina asked, quote, are you saying I was friends with them or I was sleeping with them? End quote. Snodgrass replied back, quote, you slept with 10 different men during 2012, end quote. And Shaina didn't deny this. She said, quote, in answer to your question, sure, I may have slept with 10 guys in 2012, but I don't see how it's relevant to any of this shit, end quote. Any of this shit? Any of this shit? What? You mean you trying to avoid a prison sentence that's already lenient for what you did and trying to make it even more lenient? All of this shit, it's not relevant. I mean, I guess then you could say you were living with 10 different men if that's how you describe living with someone. But anyways, when trying to prove that she was a victim of abuse, Shaina said, quote, "It's sad when someone pushes you away and pulls you back in and pushes you away and pulls you back in. There were times when he had my head going 10 different directions to where I didn't even know if that was my boyfriend or not, or what he was to me," end quote. It's funny. I'm not trying to make like a sex shaming joke or anything. Trust me. I know people are going to think I am and you'll take me out of context, but it's funny because Snodgrass was like, "Did you sleep with 10 different men?" And she was like, "Yeah, I slept with 10 different men." And then she said, Ryan had her head going in 10 different directions and it's like one direction for every man. It's funny, right? Anyways, Shaina added, quote, "I feel like I was led on. I feel like I was manipulated, used, and abused. And no, Ryan didn't beat on me every day. I'm not going to sit up here and exaggerate and lie and say that he did. But he did put hands on me a handful of times," end quote. Once again, I think Shaina's telling the truth. Put hands on me could mean multiple different things, right? She's saying without really saying it, like, I felt led on. I felt lied to. I felt betrayed. And there's no fury like a woman scorned, right? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So, and I agree, it's horrible. It doesn't feel good if somebody leads you on or won't commit to you and you care about them and you're trying so hard to win their love and affection. But you have to understand, you can't win someone's love and affection. You can't buy someone's love and affection. You can't just put yourself in their physical presence and think that it's going to be enough to make a relationship work. You cannot do those things. At that point, Shaina should have really started looking inside and wondering, hey, why am I allowing myself to continue being led on and misled and manipulated and lied to? This doesn't feel good. I'm going to find a different relationship. I don't like how this person's making me feel. And it sucks and it's not nice. And it's a horrible thing to do to somebody to, make them feel unloved or unwanted or not good enough. But it doesn't mean that Ryan deserved to be murdered. It just doesn't. Just like Travis Alexander didn't deserve to be murdered. So Michelle Snodgrass then turned to Shaina's pre-sentencing report and pointed out what she saw was missing. She asked, quote, "Can you point me to the part where you said you were sorry for taking another human being's life?" End quote. So Shaina asked to see the report, and Snodgrass rephrased, quote, "You didn't say that, did you?" End quote. Shaina then read aloud from her report. And in the report, Shaina said, quote, "Not getting away from him before October the 12th was the gravest mistake, was my gravest mistake that I'll regret for the rest of my life, and for that, I'm very sorry." End quote. Michelle Snodgrass was not letting this go. And she asked Shaina, the gravest mistake of your life? It wasn't putting 6 bullets into another human being? The gravest mistake in your life wasn't lying to everybody you cared about? Everybody who cared about you in your life? The gravest mistake was that? That's your gravest mistake in life? And Shaina had no response. She was speechless for quite possibly the first time in her life. And yeah, this is very much the way that people like Shaina are going to apologize. They're not going to say, "I'm sorry to Ryan's family. I'm sorry that this happened. I feel really bad." This is the kind of person who you'll tell them that they hurt you or they said something that hurt you or did something that hurt you, and they'll say, "I'm sorry you feel that way." They won't say, "I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I said something that hurt you. I'm sorry you feel that way." But Shaina's greatest regret in life, her greatest mistake in life, was not leaving Ryan when she was the one that wanted to keep being with him. It's just bananas. So in the end, the judge ruled that Shaina and Ryan did not meet the legal criteria to be considered domestic partners, and Shaina was not a true victim of abuse. That ruling made her ineligible for early parole under the domestic violence provision. So this is a good thing, right? At this point, the jury had said 40 years with the possibility of parole after 20. The judge is saying, hey, I'm going to go along with what the jury says, but I'm going to take that possibility of parole away. Next, the judge would hear from both sides one more time as they argued their case for what sentence Shaina should receive. Her defense team asked the judge for mercy, saying, quote, 40 years for someone who was 21 when this happened? It's too much, Your Honor. End quote. 6 bullets when 1 to the face would have done just fine. 6 bullets when 1 would have done the job just fine. It's too much, Shaina. Someone like Shaina wants to live her life in overkill mode. And then when someone's like, okay, so for your behavior, we're going to give you an equal sort of, punishment. And she's like, what? Me? No, I'm so young. I can't go to jail for 40 years, even though I took somebody's entire life. Now, obviously the prosecutor and Ryan's family, they wanted life in prison. That's what I wanted for Shaina. They needed Shaina to pay for what she had done. All she had taken away. And Ryan's father, Jay, delivered a powerful 11-page victim impact statement that laid bare the full depth of their grief. He began, quote, "From the first breath our children take to the last breath we take, we watch, we worry, we pray. Our children are our flesh and blood. Their joy is our joy. Their dreams are our dreams. Their pain is our pain. Their death is our death." On Friday, October 12th, 2012, at 9:09 p.m., my life ended. My eyes were open, my heart was still beating, there was breath in my lungs, and yet my life, a good life, was forever gone. The death of your child, even more so your only child, is the worst life can throw at you. The dreams of my past or that of my son's future. I dream no more. Now only nightmares claw at my sleep. Nightmares born in the darkness of evil that savaged the final moments of my young son's life. End quote. Jay spoke of going to bed that night, believing all was well, not knowing that everything he loved had already been taken away from him. He said Ryan was brilliant, kind, deeply loved. He said, quote, "Since the birth of Ryan, I gauged my well-being by that of his. Ryan enjoyed the love and pride of 2 good families. He was brilliant, he was beautiful, and above all, he was kind. It invades your sleep and haunts your will to live. Real loss is only possible when you love something more than you love yourself." End quote. Jay recounted how Shaina fired 6 shots, none individually fatal, but together enough to bleed Ryan to death on the floor of his own home. He feared Ryan had been aware as his life slipped away. And Jay said, quote, "Shaina Huber's aim was not only to murder, but also to disfigure, to humiliate, and emasculate that which she had been denied." End quote. Jay said Shaina had seldom been told no in life, and when Ryan said it, she killed him. He reminded the court that she hadn't just taken Ryan, but, quote, also our grandchildren and their children. In essence, she murdered generations of our families. End quote. He described what was stolen, the daughter-in-law they would never get to meet, the family they would never grow, the final moments at the end of life when a parent looks on the face of their child, all gone. And Jay said, quote, "I will leave this earth never having held my grandchildren." End quote. Jay also spoke of Shaina stalking Ryan and said that if the roles had been reversed, if Ryan had been his daughter and Shaina a man, he would have acted differently. And he said, quote, "This is where the guilt of which I spoke earlier has its genesis. Our society views the aggression of a woman against a man with less concern, as did I. If only I knew then what I know now." End quote. In this case, I absolutely agree. If the tables had been turned, if everything had gone down exactly the way it went down, and Ryan Poston was the one alive, Shaina Huber's dead, and Ryan Poston was the one sitting in front of that jury during that trial, he would have gotten life in prison. They wouldn't have given 40 years with the possibility of parole after 20. I genuinely believe that. You may think I'm off base. Let me know. Let me know in the comment section. And Jay insisted that Ryan had never hurt Shaina or anyone, that it had been Ryan who had been physically abused. Jay said, quote, "What was one of his great virtues, his kindness, played into bringing about his death. We as a family have had to endure the glacial process of prosecuting Shaina Hubers. To this day, this vile being has shown no remorse." End quote. Damn. Roasted, vile being. That's really good. He described watching her laugh and joke in court while they mourned for Ryan, for his son. And Jay said, quote, "She plans for the day she will once again walk amongst us a free woman. We who love Ryan respectfully ask the court, in the memory of Ryan Carter Poston, to delay, for as long as judicially allowed, the day this cold-blooded murderer once again walks among us. In a pure world, a just world, light should never shine on that day." End quote. Damn. All right. So after victim impact statements, Shaina was given the opportunity to speak. She apologized, but only to her family and friends. She said, quote, "I'm sorry to my family, and I'm sorry to my friends for letting them down, and I'm sorry for any hardship I've caused other people, and I'm sorry for the money that my parents had to spend on attorneys," end quote. She never once apologized to Ryan's family. "I'm sorry for the hardships I may have caused other people." Yes, I think killing somebody's son causes hardships for them. Once again, I'm sorry you feel that way. She never apologized to Ryan's family. She never apologized for what she had done. Instead, she turned the moment inward, saying, quote, "I do want to help people. I do want to be something better. And I do want to continue to grow and learn. And I just don't think that a 40-year sentence will help me," end quote. It's not supposed to help you. It's not supposed to help you. We're not here to help you. It's a punishment. It's a punishment. I don't think a 40-year prison sentence actually works with my schedule. Can we cut it down to maybe I just walk out of here right now? Shaina told the judge, quote, "I don't think it would benefit me any. I don't think that it would rehabilitate me any," end quote. I don't think that anything will rehabilitate Shaina Hubers. I really don't. I don't. In the end, the judge upheld the jury's recommendation, sentenced Shaina to 40 years, but remember, she's not going to get parole anymore. And the judge made it clear that he had considered more. He said, quote, "What I think happened in that apartment was a little more than cold-blooded murder. It was probably as cold-blooded an act as I've been associated with in the criminal justice system in the 30-plus years I've been in it," end quote. The judge acknowledged that Ryan, of course, had his own struggles. We're all humans. Humans aren't perfect, not one of us. But then the judge turned to Shaina and said, quote, "I don't think you've recognized that you have any yet," end quote. I love everybody's just roasting her. Ryan's parents, Michelle Snodgrass, the judge. Shaina inadvertently roasts herself by telling the judge that 40 years in prison just doesn't really feel like it works for her. But Shaina left that courtroom in cuffs, and afterward, Ryan's parents spoke to reporters, and Lisa said about Ryan, he couldn't even be mean to another human being. Lisa said that Shaina took advantage of that, of how nice Ryan was, how he just didn't want conflict and he didn't want to hurt anybody. She took advantage of it at every opportunity. And when asked if they wanted to say anything to Shaina, Ryan's father, Jay, didn't hesitate. He said, quote, "Oh God, no, rot in hell. She is going where she deserves to be. And where she's going, her mommy can't help her," end quote. Damn. But so true. Okay, I have to stop really quick and say to you guys, because I feel bad about this, but I just noticed when I uploaded my script, when I typed part 2 of this series, remember at the beginning in part 1, I said this is only going to be in 2 parts, and I had 2 scripts written. When I wrote part 2, I somehow, I don't know why or how this happened, was typing it in a font that was significantly smaller than I usually type it in. I have a really big keyboard. It's really long and tall, so everything looks big because I'm blind. And I just didn't realize that when I finally put it to the correct font, it was twice as long as I expected it to be. And I know I said this was going to be in only 2 parts, but there's just so much to still talk about left. And I know you think, oh, Shaina was sentenced. She's found guilty. She's going away. 40 years. There's so much more to talk about. There's so much more. There's going to be another trial, okay? There's going to be another trial. And a bunch of other stuff comes out in that trial, especially when it comes to, I guess, motive and what was going on in Shaina's head that caused her to do this, right? Because people get jealous, people break up, people don't want to break up, but most people don't do this, what Shaina did. So we still have so much to talk about. Now, like I said, it's already written, so I'm going to film it, but I feel that it will be less stressful for me because my editor won't hate me when I hand him a 4-hour video. Less stressful for you, so you're not looking at a 4-hour video and being when am I going to find the time to watch this? And less stressful for the uploading process of YouTube that already takes forever when it's a 2-hour video. And if it's a 4-hour video, it's definitely going to take forever. So I'm going to break the second part up into 2 parts. But once again, we'll be out in just a couple of days. I promise. Okay. And I promise there's still so much to talk about. I really want you guys to make sure you come back for part 3. I'm so sorry. I know I said 2 parts. But the whole script thing, how could I help it? I'm an idiot. I'm a technologically stunted person who didn't realize that the font was too small. And now I was faced with a 25-page script when normally my scripts are between 10 to 12 pages. So we're going to break this up. I'm going to stop filming this. I'm going to give it to my editor so he can start working on it. And then I'm going to sit down and film the third and final part so that we can get all of these 3 parts out to you guys within the course of just, a few days between each. I hope you forgive me. Please don't be mad at me. But if you are mad at me, tell me in the comments. Tell me off. I'm mad at myself. This is stupid. I feel bad. I am mad at myself. Tell me you're mad at me. That's fine. It's going to be in 3 parts. It will be worth it. And we're going to wrap it all up, talk about our final thoughts. And there's still a lot to talk about. This girl, Shaina Hubers, man. I cannot stop thinking about her and just trying to pick apart the Rubik's Cube that her brain and nervous system must be. It's very interesting. Lots of interesting stuff to come. So stay tuned. Like this video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'm so sorry that I'm breaking this last part up into 2 parts. I'm so sorry. Please don't be mad at me. But if you are, I understand. But anyways, I will see you very, very soon. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. Love you so much. Bye.